if we have a dearth of either nectar or pollen, what happens in our hive? Anybody know? Brood rearing stops. All brood rearing stops. Is that a good thing? No. No. In the past, 30, 40 years ago, it wasn't a big deal. Our bees were a lot stronger. They didn't have to deal with varroa mites. So we would have these dearths in the summertime, but it wasn't no big deal. Now, as beekeepers, for us to be successful and take our cluster into winter as large as possible, we cannot let our bees shut down. We've got to keep them fed. Okay? So, that's where we come in. Nectar. If there's not a flow on, the bees are not getting nectar, we've got to substitute something. We think back to what I just talked about and talked about what each sugar does. Could you feed corn syrup? Corn syrup is glucose fructose. Can we feed that to the honeybees in the summer to raise brood? Yes or no? Anybody want to say yes? No. Good answers. No. Because it's not what they need. They need sucrose, right? If our hive is light in the fall, can we feed them corn syrup? High fructose corn syrup? Yes. Yeah. But in the summer, in that summer dearth, to keep them raising brood, we've got to make sure they're getting sucrose. All right? How do we do that? A lot of ways. Regular cane table sugar mixed with water. That mimics nectar. You look at nectar in nature, 80% water, 20% sucrose. So we can do that easily with sugar. That is probably the easiest way to stimulate or continue brood rearing. However, in the summertime, springtime is not a problem. We have a lot of nectar coming in. Everything's blooming in the springtime. So the bees can make enough, they have enough spare nectar coming in that they convert a lot of it to honey and they store it as surplus honey in the hive. Not a problem. During the summer dearth, that doesn't happen. If any of you have been beekeepers for more than a year or two, this summer or the summer before weren't as bad. This summer was worse than last year. Previous summer was really bad. We had a shutdown of the nectar flow as usual, but there was nothing. And I would have beekeepers from my club, relatively new beekeepers, calling me and saying, there's something wrong with my hive. I have no brood in my hive. And my queen's just walking around. And they said, can you come and look? There's something wrong. I think my queen's sick. I think this. So I'd go take a look at these hives, and when I pulled the frame out of the brood nest, I pulled that out, and there might be some capped brood in there, and that was it. There was no wet nectar. We've all seen wet nectar, right? Uncapped, and it looks wet. Wet nectar in the hive. We'd see that, and we'd see a ring of pollen in there. Well, I'd go to these hives, and there'd be nothing. No pollen, no nectar. So, no pollen, no nectar, no brood, no food, nothing to raise baby bees. And the other bees are staying alive on what little honey there was. And for a lot of the hives, there was not even any honey in them because they pulled their honey supers, and there was none backfilled in the brood nest. So, in the summer, I recommend feeding definitely sucrose solution. Without a doubt, you've got to feed sucrose. But even better is a mixture of some sort of sucrose, fructose, glucose. Right? Corn syrup mixed with sucrose, right? Syrup. That'll give your bees all three sugars they need. And that'll keep them that side of it. The carbohydrate side, it'll keep supplied to the bees. The pollen side is another story. Our bees need pollen. And again, some summers we still have a trickle of pollen all the way in. And sometimes it shuts off completely for a while. When that happens, they stop rearing brood. They have to have both at all times to rear brood. Studies have shown that even when we have a lot of nectar and pollen out there, and say we have 2-3 days rain, steady rain, where the bees can't fly, they already cut back on their brood rearing. They know. They know what pollen they have in that hive. They know what wet nectar they have in that hive. If they see those supplies running out, they stop rearing brood, or they start consuming brood. So what's happening in the summer periods, the queen, she may or may not shut down laying eggs. But even if she's laying eggs, still, the nurse bees will come in and they'll cannibalize those eggs and remove larvae from the cells, maybe eat them, maybe get them out of the hive, because they know they can't raise them. Remember that the hive functions pretty much like an organism, right? One for all for one. bees will starve altogether, not one by one by one by one. They share everything. So if I had one drop of nectar and somebody's begging for it, I'll share half of it. And if that person now has half of my half, somebody begs them, they'll share half. So basically when a hive collapses from starvation, it all collapses at once. That would happen in the summertime. And it can if there's just not enough. Usually we have a trickle in there to keep bees alive, some bees alive, but they don't grow. They'll stop raising that brood. So we need to supply both. Now, like I said, 30, 40 years ago, they didn't feed sugar syrup most of the time. They never fed pollen. Times changed. And you cannot keep bees any more successfully without a feeding program. So the different bee companies, us included, have come up with various pollen substitutes. Ours, we have something called Ultra Bee and another one called Bee Pro. I prefer the Ultra Bee. It's got a higher protein content to it. But this is just a powder. It's just a ground powder of, I can't tell you the top secret ingredients in it. But this serves as a pollen substitute. Now, bees like to forage. I said that in the other classes. Bees, they prefer to forage for everything they do. So this we would put out for our bees during that pollen dearth. We're feeding them a sugar syrup. Did you bring a Boardman feeder in? That's okay. That's fine. In the summertime, I'll feed with an entrance Boardman feeder with a jar like this, full of syrup on the front of the hive. And for my pollen, I do one of two things and sometimes both. There's two forms of pollen substitute. There's what we call patty. And these are pollen patties. And they're mixed with a little bit of corn syrup to keep them pliable so they don't get rock hard. What I do with mine is I'm talking about the summer dearth specifically at this point. You'll have 2 brood boxes on there, at least 2, or if you're running mediums, you'll have 3. If you're running 3 brood boxes, find out where the 2 boxes have the majority of the brood. But in a 2 deep system, you've only got 2 anyway. I put on 2 pollen patties at a time. Put them on just right on top of these top bars like that, right? And then I put my second box right back on top of it, right back on top, and then put my covers on. That's right there between the brood. The bees will eat that very quickly. They'll take that. Another way to feed, like I said, they like to forage. So I will take this. Yes?
When I used the pollen patties, I had a problem with small hive beetle.
Very good point. I'll talk about that in 1 second. So I preferred using dry as well. I'll take some of this, I'll put it in a 5-gallon bucket, put it right at the very bottom of the 5-gallon bucket. I'll take that bucket out somewhere, and I'll put it, I put it on my stone wall. I slightly tilt it up like this so the rain doesn't get back here where I have the pollen, and leave it out there. The bees will come and forage for that. I have a picture of it somewhere. Do we have one printed out anywhere? We'll have to get one of those. We have a picture of them foraging in Thanksgiving, taking pollen. And they'll take, when you give them dry pollen, they actually eat the patties faster as well for some reason. But giving them this dry pollen, they'll bring this back, and then they continue to raise brood.
You have problems with ants getting the pollen? Do ants go after the pollen?
No, not as far as I can tell. Skunks, yes. Raccoons, yes. And one neighbor I suspect has been eating my pollen. Bears will definitely take it. My dog ate it, threw it back up.
But you can take a dig if it's by your house. You can take it in each day.
You could, yes. And I know the ladies, the bee squad at the University of Minnesota, they actually eat these patties. They're edible. They eat them like those exercise pro. Yeah, they do taste good.
They do. I taste them.
Like what are those exercise bars you used to eat? Those protein bars, whatever they were called. Yeah, they taste kind of like that. But yeah, power bar. That's it.
Who eats those?
The bee squad, the women of the bee squad out at University of Minnesota. But so if you put that pollen, dry pollen out there, and have the patties in here, and you're feeding syrup, your bees will continue to raise brood, which is exactly what you want. The whole goal of all of this stuff is to continue to keep that big, strong brood nest going into winter. And I always tell people, don't try to build your brood nest in October. It's too late. You're thinking about your winter brood nest in July and August, when there's nothing. That's when you're thinking about it. Because these are the bees that are going to raise the bees that go through winter. So you always have to think a few brood cycles ahead.